A compelling detective story, a cloak and dagger action, and a romantic drama, all these stories were taken from real life. The history of Kazakhstan is inseparable from the world history. Reflections on history, our version. History of some contraband cases. Heat summer at the border with China. No caravans can be seen. Well, naturally, there are no caravans in the 21st century, but close your eyes for a moment and imagine these places centuries ago. Chinese ancient customs officers, caravans of camels loaded with goods, merchant traders and travelers negotiating with the customs to cross the country's border. Imagine an ancient customs officer inquiring, "Where are you going? What are you carrying? Do you have any illicit goods?" Anyway, who would immediately admit that they really did? Therefore, they had to be searched for such goods. The illicit goods changed and were always transported. They included salt, tea and weapons, which were popular for several centuries. The first smuggling, which was legendarily recorded on the Great Silk Road, was silkworm larvae smuggling. It was a Chinese princess who smuggled them in her coiffure. History does not reveal when the first customs officials appeared, but perhaps it was when the first borders were established. They quite often deceived customs officials. It happened at all times. It is a historical area and it has many secrets. Chapter 1. Along secret paths. One of the great silkware routes passed through this place. It went from Southeast Asian countries to Western Europe. It is widely believed that the Great Silk Road opened in the 2nd century BC. First, there were Huns who exerted control over this area. However, tribes and governments replaced each other and they had their own laws and duties, so smugglers had enough opportunities to operate, although there were enough customs officials to stop them. There were borders through which caravans went and where military conflicts occurred. Rulers often replaced each other. Although nomads could not be good merchants, they were perfect guards. Protection provided by them was necessary since nomads conducted raids themselves. During that period, China was divided into parts for a long time and was weak in political and military respect. The Turks made northern regions of China pay them regularly. Sometimes they had to pay contributions. Occasional looting can help provide money only for a small country, but it cannot continue for a long time. As for a larger state, it needs different opportunities, which have to be legal. A country needs a reliable source of income in order to sustain its might. What can provide this source? It can be constituted by the development of agriculture, which is possible if peasants are not robbed, and the development of trade based on fewer caravan robberies and better safety procedures. China was not eager to trade with the warlike nomads. Moreover, it tried to avoid contact with them. They even built the Great Wall of China, which is why the nomads had to force the Chinese to trade with them. Both Huns and their heirs Turks forced China to pay out for the disorder on the border, and they paid with silk. The Celestial Empire responded to this with a ban on the export of weapons, iron and other goods of military significance. As a result, these goods were smuggled. This crime rose at that time and later, as well as counterfeit. For example, archaeological finds confirm that mirrors were forged in Talgar. It was sent from Iran. Perhaps the copy had been made there and then was clipped. It is clear that it was a fake made exactly like the original. As Talgar dwellers were artisans soldering iron, they just molded it. One of the important goods was tea, which was also faked by mixing it with low-quality kinds of tea, and then it was sold as the best quality drink, and tea was really considered as such for a long time. It is most likely that tea appeared in the steppe thanks to smugglers because tea exports from China had been prohibited for a long time. For example, the Turks didn't have tea. However, approximately in the 5th century AD, tea became the drink of nomadic aristocrats. Even in the 19th century, tea didn't come cheap, with a tea bar sometimes costing a ram. Incidentally, tea smuggling was considered one of the most profitable businesses for a few centuries. Quite often, customs officials lost to smugglers, since the latter knew secret paths, special ways of transporting goods and specific skills, such as behaving in the correct manner if arrested, and they even did combat preparation. They always passed down these skills to younger generations. Their clan was based on family relations, and they couldn't teach outsiders the tricks of the trade. The smugglers carried out some typical maneuvers, such as sending scouts who pretended that they had lost their way or were drunk in order to locate border guard detachments. They often used trained dogs in their operations. There were no borders. For example, the Naimans could herd cattle from Makanchi and Nauvali. They didn't say, went to the other shore, meaning returning to homeland. Chapter 2. Tamga examined. Caravans of many thousand traders followed this route. They carried Chinese silk, tea, gunpowder and paper to one side, and metal goods such as weapons and wood to the other side. In the 13th century, due to steppe reformer Genghis Khan, certain merchants started stamping goods with tamgas, which meant that the goods had been examined and were under protection, while the goods without tamgas were deemed smuggled. This process led to the appearance of customs officials. As a result, the steppe and borders were set in order at the time of the Golden Horde. They developed such an infrastructure as caravanserai, transits and towns with bazaars, which were useful for merchants during their trips. Later, strict rules regarding smuggling and caravan protection were imposed in the Empire of Timur. For example, a province where merchants' property was encroached upon had to pay twice the amount of compensation for all losses. In addition, they had a 5-fold fine imposed on them, which they paid to the state treasury. As for corruption cases, both Genghis Khan and Ami Timur were relentless, and people committing this crime were executed. The kinds of death penalty differed depending on what had been stolen. I do not think that a medieval despot, after finding out that he'd been deprived of some money, could show mercy. In order to establish effective control, some cities were destroyed and trade routes passed through those places where it was easy to protect and control them. As caravans were advancing and duties were paid, the trade flourished. After Timur's death, the process of disintegration started, and the Great Silk Road had fallen into decay by the 16th century. Nevertheless, the border crossing points didn't decline in importance, and caravans continued traveling mainly to Russia. Russian merchants were prohibited from entering China, and they traded through intermediaries. Military units under the command of Bagators maintained order in the Kazakh Khanate. There is some information about our Kabanbai Bagator in the archives of the city of Urumqi in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. He also offered protection to the caravans here. He escorted them to China, and according to some data, he even sold cattle there. We can say that he was the head of the customs office. Yes, we can say so. The secret paths were followed in the 18th century too. Moreover, some cities were founded thanks to the smugglers. According to a widely known story, in order to distract the emperor from his misdeeds, associate of Peter I, Siberian governor Prince Gagarin, said that there was gold somewhere in Kazakh land. However, the result was different from what had been planned. An expedition was sent and fortresses were built along so-called Irtysh line. But instead of gold, they found out that the governor had carried out smuggling at the national level. Prince Gagarin allowed his and some other people to carry goods to China as if they had been sent by the sovereign and had been accompanied with his merchants. This brought him a lot of money. At the same time, they didn't allow anyone else to trade with China. The covetous prince was executed, and at the same time Semipalatinsk was founded in the area where one of the fortresses was situated. It was a city of merchants, smugglers, customs officials and exiles. In 1728, customs were established there in order to control merchants and other people. Chapter 3. Blame our death on. Smuggling, corruption and bureaucratic arbitrariness rose in the good city of Semipalatinsk in the 18th and the 19th centuries. Almost every day somebody was arrested. They had a law by which 50% of the sold goods was given to the customs official who had arrested a smuggler. In 1805, an international scandal broke. A mass suicide was committed near the Chinese border. Armenian merchants' clerks carrying goods were arrested in Semipalatinsk and then committed suicide. They could not speak Russian or any of the local languages, and customs officers took advantage of it. Before committing suicide, the clerks wrote a letter. We cannot bear it any longer. They have been treating us indecently and have been using our goods for 4 months. They wanted us to give them a lot of money. The details of the tragedy reached St. Petersburg. The guilty lost the job and were punished. Afterwards, the officials had to swear that they would be honest and loyal. Only highly recommended young Cossacks who are completely sober and are good at Russian grammar and Kazakh language should be employed in the Guard. From the middle of the 19th century, Semipalatinsk customs were among showpieces. In addition, China and Russia signed an agreement and the number of trade caravans increased. In 1852, over 50 pounds of silk were delivered to Chuguchak, and some of it was exchanged for Kazakh products. At the same time, export of Chinese rice and Chinese copper coins was considered smuggling. In addition, salt was also considered smuggling goods. Many countries held a state monopoly on salt. People smuggling salt into China were sentenced to execution by crushing or beheading. However, it was not very effective. Smugglers united in secret societies, armed themselves, and didn't give in without fighting. They operated at night, which is why they were called salt owls. Finally, the prohibited product crossed the border. Salt was always considered strategic goods. Therefore, this way was very profitable for Russia. They needed salt, and it was one of the reasons why they started settling in these areas. There is one more story about using money coming from smuggling to build a church. It was built by Mitrofan Kazakov, acquaintance of Dostoevsky. He worked as customs sergeant in Semipalatinsk and then resigned, which was quite a scandal. Kazakov brought from a fair allegedly unregistered wine in barrels, and duty hadn't been paid on this wine. Later it was found out that it was hemp oil. Well, you can guess why there was hemp oil instead of wine. Perhaps this man managed to convince the authorities that wine had turned into oil. According to other documents, the aforementioned Kazakov was involved in criminal conspiracy with merchants. Incidentally, after the resignation, the former customs official worked as a teacher. Therefore, smugglers often had more than one occupation. During the daytime, there were decent people who baked bread or taught children, while in their free time their life was completely different. Epilogue. No information in the chronicle. Each episode is like an adventure film. Of course, there were 1,000 times more occurrences, but chronicles have only the best operations of the opposite. Basically, they preferred keeping silence about such exploits. It was a history of some contraband cases.